Welcome back for episode 6 of Salmon Report, a weekly series introducing rotations to Salmon Run and some tricks and tips to all the weapons so you might have a better experience. This is our first episode since the schedule change, and from now on I'll be able to cover all rotations for the week, so we'll talk about 5 different shifts instead of our usual 3. So without further ado, let's dive in. As a quick summary, this week looks incredibly comfy for now. It is full of normal shooters and dualies that most are comfortable with, and all the complementary weapons are relatively easy to use too, so I think we'll have a great time. And since most of the weapons are generic shooters, I also don't have to tell you much about that. It's about overall Salmon Run experience rather than the guns themselves. What surprises me the most is that some weapons return way too often compared to others, such as the Ballpoint Splatling, which is not that big of a problem since it's a fantastic weapon, but still I'd love some more variety here. We have several top Salmon Run weapons scattered in all of the shifts too, which is quite lucky honestly, and will help a lot in either maintaining ranks or climbing a bit. And of course, we also have a Wildcard Weekend this week featuring the Grizzco Blaster. The current and first rotation is on Sockeye Station, and the weapons are the Dark Tetra Dualies, Squeezer, Nautilus, and the normal Rapid Blaster. For the Tetra Dualies, it is vital to make use of your turret mode by dodging a lot and firing after, since this weapon is somewhat a weaker dualie that specializes in mobility, which is not bad in Salmon Run but does not have the same advantages as in PvP. So to counter the weaker damage, you really have to be in turret mode as much as you can. You don't deal more damage per hit, but your fire rate is increased. Tetras also have very short range, so the enemies you are efficient against are pretty limited, and I personally prefer to use them for clearing the stage of hordes and bosses that are easier to handle, and let the rest of the team handle the more annoying ones. One cool thing about dualies, but the Tetra Dualies especially, is that if you're overwhelmed in Salmon Run, you get splatted pretty fast, since you can't move out of salmonid ink. But dualie rolls are not affected by this slow, so as long as you have ink, you can roll up to 4 times a wave with the Tetra Dualie, which is quite an awesome escape tool. We already talked about the Squeezer before. It's a fun little gun that has 2 firing modes that players who never tried the gun don't know about. If you hold down the fire button, you have short range automatic fire that's mainly used for painting, but I think it's also better when you are surrounded by a lot of chums or during Glowfly wave, as this mode consumes half as much ink as your other firing mode. Instead, if you tap fire repeatedly, the Squeezer deals 38 damage instead of 30, and your firing range is doubled along with close to perfect accuracy. This is your main damage dealing mode no matter if you need range or not, so if you're trying to do the most damage in the shortest amount of time, tap fire is the way to go. Which mode you should use still depends on the situation, but players from Turf War usually ignore ink capacity as a resource and recommend to only use the tap firing, which I think is a mistake, since in Salmon Run managing your ink is crucial, and there are some situations where your continuous fire might be more advantageous, since you can fire for twice as long without having any ink problems. Apart from that, the Squeezer is a perfect all-rounder weapon for all situations, so I would say feel free to use and play it as free as you'd like and help your coworkers. The Nautilus is a favorite for a lot who usually don't like Splatlings, as this gun's specialty is that it can recharge itself anytime during firing, similarly to the Ballpoint Splatling, but it's also capable of holding its charge while swimming in ink, meaning if you're a bit overwhelmed by a lot of enemies close, which is deadly to most Splatlings, the Nautilus can just swim away while holding its charge and continue firing after it's safe again without having to bother recharging itself. It's a really neat Splatling that allows for more defense and safety, but apart from that, it's very straightforward and has a normal Splatling playstyle, so focus on fish sticks, steelheads, the usual long-range bosses, and keep to range and high ground where you excel at the most. Finally, the Rapid Blaster. It is the short-range version of the Rapid Blaster Pro we had before in Sockeye Station, and is my preferred version of the two, at least for Salmon Run, since that bit of faster fire rate I value a lot more than the range of the Pro version. As most blasters, the Rapid Blaster excels against stingers and fish sticks, but since I think this rotation has more than enough weapons to deal with those bosses, the real strength of this blaster should be used to clear hordes. As most blasters, by aiming at hordes from above in a good angle, you can deal lots of damage to whole hordes, and you are the most efficient weapon to do so too, especially for special waves with glowflies or goldies, so I recommend sticking to lesser salmonid splatting to help your team the most. But still, it's everyone's responsibility, not just yours in the end. The second shift is on Gonefish and Hydroplant with the Splat Dualies, the normal blaster, the Ballpoint Splatling, and the Goo Tuber. If you like the dapple dualies, the Splat Dualies are pretty much right there. They are one of the best continuous firing DPS in Salmon Run, meaning they do the most damage while also considering ink recovery. Splat Dualies are an ultimate all-rounder weapon in my opinion, so this rotation is already extremely strong thanks to them. Despite other dualies having multiple advantages after rolling, the Splat Dualies also only enjoy increased accuracy and fire rate, but the range and damage remains the same. I have no advanced tips for this weapon especially, it's just a very powerful shooter that's good in all situations, so the more experience you generally get in Salmon Run, the more efficiently you can also use the Splat Dualies. The normal blaster is your mainstream blaster weapon, average in all aspects, so average fire rate, range and impact. There's not much to say overall about the weapon, except the usual blaster advice to keep to fish sticks, stingers and hordes. Overall, I think the blaster is pretty weak, so it doesn't excel at anything, but remember that with blasters, keeping your distance is vital to make sure your shots actually explode around the enemies and deal proper damage, so you don't want to be cornered. If you're shooting at enemies close range or at the ground, you're nearly not doing as much damage if you actually hit enemies or you explode your shots near them at a range. The Ballpoint Splatling is a VIP by now in the series. We already discussed it I think 4 times and you can check that out in previous episodes, but a gentle reminder that it's a Splatling with 2 firing modes, the burst mode and the long range mode. The burst fire is one of the highest burst DPS in the game, and during long range mode it acts as a normal Splatling, useful for most situations. Since the Ballpoint Splatling can recharge itself during firing, you can learn to perfect control these 2 firing modes by fully charging to burst fire, and keeping it to partial charges in charge 1 to keep long range mode. It's a very versatile weapon where if you master its charging system, you'll start to really appreciate how strong this gun is for Salmon Run and why it's considered one of the top weapons. Last but not least, the Goo Tuber. This week's niche really seems to be about charge holding weapons, since the Goo Tuber's specialty is also that it can hold charges for the longest time and also swim with its charge. So similarly like the Nautilus we talked about earlier, you can swim away and then shoot once you're safer while holding your charges. The Goo Tuber charges a bit slower compared to a Splat charger, but it's vital with this weapon to utilize its partial charges, as you don't always need that full charge to splat things around you, though this tip applies to most chargers as well. Remember that chargers can paint well, and next to splatting bosses, you are also a great horde clearer, as your full charges shoot through or pierce through all enemies in a line, so make use of it and clear those hordes for your team. You are much more formidable even at short range than most people think, you just have to practice using chargers in close range. Next shift is on spawning grounds with the Splash-o-matic, Splatana Wiper, Splattershot Pro and the Rapid Blaster Pro. The Splash-o-matic is a very popular weapon right now, but I would caution everyone, similarly to the arrow spray that in Salmon Run, it's not as strong as in PvP. It plays similarly to the arrow spray, but its advantage is that it has perfect aim in comparison. But its damage output is much lower than its favorite brother, the Splatio-matic, which is considered one of the best weapons in Salmon Run. Now that doesn't mean it's a bad weapon, it's actually a very standard shooter, good for most situations, and thanks to its accuracy you can go for all the Salmonid bosses for it, so it's once again a weapon where your experience counts the most, not the weapon itself. I only urge you not to overestimate its damage, because it's nearly not as strong as the Splatio-matic. The Splatana Wiper returns, and it's one of the new weapons in Splatoon 3 that has also proven itself to be an incredibly strong choice for Salmon Run. I went a bit deeper into them in episode 5, but a reminder to make use of its different firing modes, the tap fires and its charge fire mode. Both modes can also enjoy an increased damage if you hit enemies in melee, which are fantastic against bosses, and similarly like the sloshing machine, if you aim above hordes with its charge attack, the wave you shoot does not get absorbed but will damage all enemies in line, it will pierce them, so that's a crucial horde clearing tech to learn. But the same tech can also be used against stingers, as if you go under them and you shoot upwards with your piercing wave, it will take care of all the pots in 1 or 2 shots. Your melee charge attack, meaning actually hitting with a sword, is one of the highest DPS you can achieve in Salmon Run, great against Kohazuna and big shots on shores. The Splattershot Pro is fairly a boring weapon in my opinion. There isn't really much to say about it except it lacks a bit of paint and fire rate. It's a standard shooter where you should make use of its range rather than going too close to Salmonids, but I don't feel there is much to talk about it. Similarly as most shooters, it's more about your movement and overall experience rather than the gun itself. But considering the rotation, try to prioritize long-range targets like steelheads and fish sticks, as other weapons in this rotation might struggle against them, so if you can fill that gap, you will be a useful coworker. The final weapon this rotation is the Rapid Blaster Pro. While everything I said for the Rapid Blaster a bit earlier in rotation 1 counts, except this Pro has longer range, so you should keep a bigger distance between you and the Salmonids. The one targeted tip for this shift I have is to stay on the platform around the basket, as it's a great position to fire from and make use of your advanced range with the Rapid Blaster Pro. And so we arrived at the wildcard rotation. This rotation means every single wave you can get any weapon from the game, so the more weapons you are experienced with and tried playing with, the better your chances are, but apart from that, good luck. The good thing is that the stage is Sockeye Station, which I think is the easiest map, but also the stage that most weapons benefit from, so at least we have that to help. The special weapon this time around is the Grizzco blaster, which is one of my favorites as it is an ultimate pew-pew weapon with the strength of a Luna blaster and the fire rate of the Clash blaster, so as long as you can aim in the direction of threat, you'll splat everything. I think this rotation will be way more fun than the previous Grizzco Stringer one, and I can't wait for it personally. So I will also stream my session here on this channel, so come by and say hello in the live stream. Our final rotation, sadly not a big run it seems, is on Gone Fish and Hydroplant with the 52 Gal, Splattershot, Bamboozler, and the Tenta Brella. Spicy! It's already a great rotation since we have two normal shooters that players are good with, and the Splattershot is a very powerful one that gets often underestimated. I would use both the 52 Gal and the Splattershot as a generic shooter. I feel really bad about saying this all the time, but really that's the strength of these guns, that they are generic shooters that excel in most situations, and it's rather about your decision making than the guns themselves. The 52 Gal obviously is better with a bit range between you because of its slower fire rate, so chums and small fries can quickly overwhelm you, so I wouldn't go against hordes. But the Splattershot does not have that problem, and you can be a bit braver into getting to hot situations or going to the shore if you have to. With the 52 Gal, I definitely wouldn't go to the shore. We talked about the Bamboozler before, and its strength lies in its ability to fire rapidly and with different power. To really master this weapon, you have to learn to use tap firing, half charges, partial charges, and even full charges against different enemies to make best use of time and the weapon's capabilities, but beware as the Bamboozler does not pierce through enemies like other chargers, so it's not that great against hordes. I think the biggest mistake most players do with the Bamboozler is that they play it like a charger. But in fact, the Bamboozler should be played like a standard shooter or similar to the Squeezer even. Be a bit more aggressive with it, move around the map, utilize its mobility as it's way faster than other chargers and it's capable of getting out of tough situations, and use it like a shooter rather than a normal charger. And finally, the Tenta Brella, one of the most niche weapons but surprisingly powerful one. It's shooting fairly slowly, but its shots deal a lot of damage. But you can easily split steelheads or any other bosses with it as long as you aim in the middle without missing its shot, since it's like a shotgun. Its strength really comes from its Brella shield on the other hand. I would avoid firing your shield as it's your best tool for defense, and even though it paints well and can deal decent damage, it can bug quite a lot, and again, if you use it for defense, it's gonna be way more useful. Instead, you should focus on regenerating the shield by tap firing instead for a bit when it's down. To say it simple, it should be used similarly like a roller's rolling attack, that you open your Brella and push against enemies, since if enemies touch your Brella it deals damage. And you can use it as defense especially during waves such as glowflies, as it can protect the whole team easily. So tap fire for lots of damage and hold your shield against hordes or to deal additional damage against anything by bumping into them. And that's a wrap for this week's Salmon Report, everyone. Surprisingly good and simple week overall, as I mentioned so many average shooters that none of you will have problems with, and it's a good opportunity to push your ranks with them. This episode got fairly long since we are covering the whole week now, but at least I'm not missing any rotations and I can help with all of them. But please let me know if this format is something you enjoy or should we change something. But I'll be doing them now every Monday going on. As always, if I left out something, share your tips about weapons. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask and we'll help. Thank you so much for supporting the series as always. And if you have any weapons you'd like more help on, let me know in the comment section and I might make a video on it. Good luck this week, my coworkers, happy hunting, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.